Alicia Cairns.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for Bolton South East for coming to this place at such a difficult time. My heart goes out to you and your family and all those who you care for so deeply. You are a true friend to Bosnia and Herzegovina, and you have been since you came to this place, and I know you will continue to be for a long time. So I thank her for all her work on this issue and for working with me to secure this debate, which matters. Because what we say in this place is heard. What we say in this place changes things and can make people safer, and that is why we have a duty to speak today in this place. I must declare that I hold an interest in this debate as chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Bosnia and Herzegovina. This debate is taking place during Remembering Srebrenica week, and I thank the Backbench Business Debate for making sure that could happen. But most of all, I'm pleased today to be able to speak because we're joined in the chamber by my constituent, Karen Packwood, and her family, who will be observing the debate. And I thank her for allowing me to tell the story of her late husband, Amir, a victim of the Bosnian War, a proud, kind and loving man. But before I come on to Amir's story, I want to reflect on why today matters so much. We all know that the Srebrenica genocide represents the most extreme case of ethnic cleansing in the long and painful Bosnian War of 1992 to 1995. There were many other atrocities which we should reflect and we must take the time to, but this has become symbolic of just how industrialised, appalling and truly evil the acts that we saw take place during that time were. It was the barbarity of Srebrenica and the failure of the UN's peacekeeping mission that forced the international community to finally put an end to the bloodshed and to implement the Dayton Agreement, which has prevented a bullet being fired in anger since then. Back in March 1995, the so-called president of the self-declared Republika Srpska directed his military to remove Bosniaks from Srebrenica. He called for the creating of an unbearable situation of total insecurity with no hope of further life or survival. This grim directive was followed on the 11th of July 1995 by the then leader of the Bosnian Serb military entering Srebrenica and boasting, "We give this town to the Serb nation. The time has come to take revenge on the Muslims." 10,000 Bosniaks had fled in advance, but many were captured or intimidated into surrendering through the use of terror, murder, torture and rape. The men and boys were rounded up and put into makeshift concentration camps. And then the killing began in earnest. Over 8,000 Bosniak Muslim boys and men were killed in cold blood, often after mutilation or being blindfolded. Their bodies weren't just hastily buried without respect or decency. They were buried, and then weeks later in came the diggers that dug up their bodies and moved them from site to site in what is an obvious attempt to hide a genocide. As a result of that, many have yet to be buried. Their bodies lie in small boxes in a dark, cold chamber that I have visited in Bosnia, where you see the many bones that people are working tirelessly to put together so that families can bury their loved ones and finally find some semblance of closure. I remember seeing a funeral when I was in Bosnia, and the heartache on that community as they came together to finally bury one of their loved ones is something I will never forget. This was a deliberate genocide to eradicate the Bosniak population and replace them with a Serbian community that was somehow suggested to be superior to another. And today we remember the victims, and we remember what led to this, and we draw lessons and learn to prevent it again. I also want to remember all the victims of the Bosnian War, which saw over 100,000 deaths and 2 million people displaced, whether in Banja Luka, Sarajevo or Brčko. Those who face expulsion, terror and death in the name of ethnic cleansing must always be remembered. And that is why I will use their names and the stories of people like Amir, rather than naming those who sought glory in the death of others. Each of those victims is an individual whose story was distorted, tortured and eradicated, cut short by the brutality of ethnic cleansing. And we must always keep this truth close to our hearts and remember, because hearing individual stories matters, no matter how difficult it might be. And that is why I want to share Amir's story, who was only 11 when the war began in 92. Amir was a happy boy who lived with his family, played football in the park, and enjoyed toy cars and comics. But then the militia came. Emir was evicted and he lost everything. His toys, his comics, everything he loved, and his innocence. Aged 13, as Emir walked down the infamous Sniper Alley in Sarajevo, a Serb soldier took aim and shot him. And I'm not ashamed of my tears today, Madam Deputy Speaker, because every time we shed a tear, we show that we care, and that we will not stand for these people being forgotten and silenced. Emir cried out when he was shot to the soldier, "I'm just a boy. I'm not a soldier. Why are you shooting me?" And sadly, Emir knew the answer. He was a male, and he was a Bosniak. This made him a target for annihilation, because according to the Serbs, he was not human. He did not deserve to live. He did not deserve a family. He did not deserve a future. And that day, they tried to take everything from him, but they failed. As Emir lay struggling, he was failed again. He noticed a nearby United Nations tank and a peacekeeping soldier. He cried out for help, and the soldier did nothing. The soldier ignored his screams of agony and for help by an innocent 13-year-old boy. We know the international community failed in Bosnia, but there are also many who served with distinction at the time, including British soldiers who were in this place, those who saved thousands. I wish in particular to commend the Honourable Member for Beckenham, now known as Bosnia Bob, for exactly the right reasons. He helped evacuate thousands by helicopter from around Srebrenica despite being told not to. And that is the kind of heroism that we need more of around the world. People who step up, who step through bureaucracy, who refuse to be told no, because they will save lives and they will protect those who deserve it. Despite such actions of heroism, the international community did not do enough. They did not stop the war, they did not prevent genocide, and they didn't do enough for Emir. We have to work harder in this place, within our government, and internationally to help those struggling against hatred and violence. And some of those who've been raised today, the Uyghur people, their voices should have been heard 10 years ago, 2 decades ago, because the genocide is not new, and yet somehow in this place it is only since 2019 that anyone has wanted to talk about it. We have an obligation to do better, and to be the voices for those who others seek to silence. As Emir lay bleeding on the floor, a passing civilian grabbed him and carried him to a car, saving him. In the car, he fainted. He awoke in a Sarajevo hospital where he was subjected to attempts to save his life that no 13-year-old child should ever have to endure. Blood transfusions, operations lasting up to 9 hours. Emir had a heart attack and barely survived. But finally, he began to recover, only to awake to discover that his parts of his body would never truly be the same again. His colon attached to a colostomy bag, and having to see his body in a state that no child should. After 3 months in hospital, Emir was barely hanging on. Malnutrition caused his teeth to fall out, and his weight to drop to 3.5 stone. Then Holocaust survivor Eli Wiesel saw him on the news. And unbeknown to Emir, someone decided that goodness had to win, and he began to organise his rescue. Eli ensured that Emir was taken to Paris, where he received the first-class care away from the war that he deserved and was given the food that his body needed to recover and survive. But he took no joy in being able to eat. He thought only of his family in Sarajevo, who still starved under the Serb blockade. But Emir survived, and he learnt to thrive and to find joy again. And he found love with Karen, and he lived a full life. Many of the boys of Srebrenica and across Bosnia did not receive this second chance. But the agony of war stretches far into the future, and that bullet that was shot in hatred and the transfusions that saved his life at that time ultimately killed him because they were contaminated blood. His liver failed him 25 years later, and he is another victim of the Bosnian War. So today we pay tribute in this place to Emir and his family, and we remember all the victims and all the survivors, whoever and wherever they are. I have been and remain deeply moved by the strength of those who survived the terrible events, in particular the mothers of Srebrenica that my honourable friend touched on earlier. These women who fight so hard for justice and their loved ones and their communities. These women who have seen the worst of humanity and yet demonstrate the best of it. I met with them again most recently a few months ago, and they gave me this flower, this memorial of Srebrenica, one of only 8,000 made. so that I could carry in my heart at all times their strength. Their lack of vengefulness or revenge in the face of such evil and their drive for justice is the story of Bosnia and Herzegovina now. From the pain, the people of Bosnia have built a culturally rich, vibrant and beautiful place that is a forward-looking European nation. Positivity out of pain is one of the greatest strengths of the Bosnian people. But the ability to move on and to heal is reliant on one thing, and that is the truth. Through dialogue and through truth we heal, and we help those who are still searching, who are still healing. The whole foundation of modern Bosnia relies on truth. The truth that what occurred in the war was a deliberate genocide. And that is why genocide denial is not a difference of opinion. No. Genocide denial is a deliberate and calculated attack on survivors. It is a weapon that seeks to hurt the people in institutions that have grown out of the ashes and against everything that has been thrown at them. Denial is a continuation of the genocide itself. What begins with violence and killing is continued through the falsification of history. And we see this today. I have sat opposite Dodik as he used the word Muslim as a weapon. I have sat opposite people who glorify these murders, who deny they took place, who light flames and go and intimidate Muslims today in Bosnia, lighting up flames, saying that they will still drive them out of that country. Language is a weapon system, and there are foreign governments facilitating secessionist and divisive narratives. I am pleased that since we last stood in this debate, there has been enormous progress, driven by the all-party parliamentary group. We demanded that the government raise Bosnia and Herzegovina at the NATO meeting of ministers, and we were the only country to do so as a result. We demanded sanctions, which have now been put in place, and which the President of Bosnia thanked us for again last night. We demanded disinformation experts to be delivered to Bosnia. They have done so. And all of this was thanks, in a large part, to the amazing Bosnian Ambassador Vanja and to our Ambassador Matthew Field, who has sadly now moved on to another role. We know that violence must be combated with strength, but we must also remember that denial is fought through remembrance, and that is why today matters. The theme for this year's Remembering Srebrenica Week is combating denial and challenging hatred. So let us be very clear today that the British Parliament and the British people will never forget Srebrenica, and we will never forget our friends. We will remember the past, reject hatred and division, and build upon a foundation of truth. And in so doing, we can only build a better future. We will be a voice for those who others seek to silence, and we will aspire to adopt in our own lives even a shred of the dignity, compassion and strength that the survivors of Srebrenica and their loved ones show. They are the best of us, and as the spectre of hatred and division is weaponised again in Bosnia, we cannot let them down. Thank you.